This is Brian Young, Super Bowl champ, 49er. You're listening to Matt and Dexter on The Grueling Truth.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the 49ers Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Radio Network, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. I'm your host, Matt Andruscavage, and I'd like to welcome in my co-host, former San Francisco 49ers running back, Dexter Carter.
Happy New Year's, Matt, and everybody out in 49er faithful land. Hey, it's a great day. It's going to be a great year, and what a way to end the 49er football season this year. Man, it's going to be a great year.
Happy New Year to you as well, and I fully agree. Watching the 49ers yesterday against the Rams, the Rams were resting players, but you know what? It doesn't matter. The Niners were able to win their final 5 games and make it very exciting for everyone, and now they get to ride momentum into this offseason, and there's quite a lot to look forward to next year.
Absolutely right. It wasn't about the Rams and who they rested. It was about how can you go out and perform at a level that continues your momentum into the offseason. And this team did exactly that. They didn't let the fans down. They didn't let themselves down, nor the organization. They went out there and continued the process of winning, preparing, and playing collectively together as a team. And, man, boy, they did it. They did it well, and they improved every single week. So it gives a lot of clarification to this front office on the direction that they have to go and the plan that they've already started as far as going into the offseason, preparing this team, evaluating talent. So this team is in a great position and probably one of the best positions of anybody in the entire league as far as preparing and getting ready in their direction for 2018. The way the 49ers finished their season is quite different than the way just throwing in the Jaguars on how the Jaguars are going into the playoffs. You know, they lost the last 2 games, and if you pick which side you want to be in, you would like to be in the playoffs. But you always want to go into the offseason or the playoffs with momentum, and the 49ers are definitely going into their offseason with great momentum.
Yeah, you bring up, like the Jaguars. I think about also the Eagles. The Eagles losing their quarterback and then not even able to score a point yesterday against Dallas, even though they still end up having home field advantage. That kind of thing can definitely hurt you. Now, I don't know that fortunately it did not hurt the team that you were on in 1994, going down to Minnesota, resting guys, and coming away, even though you guys were winning when you had the starters in, the Vikings were able to win 21-14 going into that bye week. And fortunately, everything turned out the way it was supposed to. But that definitely can. You don't want to go into the playoffs limping. And so, granted, the Niners are not going to the postseason this year, but next year I think they're going to look back at what happened this year and how they finished strong. And I think that's probably going to be a goal, a long-term goal of Coach Shanahan, to always finish strong.
Absolutely. And even the year you're talking about, even when we rested players, we had momentum going into that game where we rested players. So we always went into the playoffs very, very strong. And it seems like here early on in the Shanahan regime, they're getting into that psychological, emotional feel that a team needs to play collectively as a group and create that accountability in each other. See, what Garoppolo has brought into this organization is exactly what New England had, or New England continues to have. They have an aura about them, an expectation, a way in which they say a leader always can raise the level of not just the players around them, but it raises the level of coaches. It raises the level and expectations of an organization. And Garoppolo, see, he I remember, in just a little short story, I remember when I left as a free agent to go to the Jets. And, this isn't something positive to even mention about me, but I'm just saying from a football perspective. I just went from the Super Bowl champions to the New York Jets. And you know what? And the Jets are better now than they were then. But I went to the Jets, and I believe, we lost every game up until the time that I was released, and which was 10 games. And I fell right into that pessimistic, nobody really making anybody accountable. Not saying that they weren't good players, but right then I think it was more the leadership, Rich Kotite, and how he ran things. But nonetheless, I fell right into the way the team played, the way the team prepared. You thought you were preparing, but it wasn't that winning attitude. Garoppolo's coming over from New England, to a team that he could have easily said, oh, my God, what am I getting into? But, hey, we'll go ahead on and lose, play the best we can, lose the rest of the games. And you know what? Hey, let's try to win. That's how he could have done. But he came in here, and he didn't change his expectation and I didn't change my work ethic, but nonetheless, Garoppolo in the quarterback position found the way, and you can do it easier from the quarterback position than you can any other position. And he raised the level of play up everyone around him, and it didn't take a month. It didn't take 2 months. It took him literally from the time that he got the starting job. But I'm going to tell you, he started when he first walked into that door because they noticed, the aura around him. And even before he started, I think it was a couple of weeks, they were watching him. They were watching him. Quarterbacks were watching him in the meeting room. The coaches and players were watching him as he walked around that facility and in practice, how he performed in practice before he even got on the field. And I'm going to tell you what, he changed that complex, that facility immediately from the time he walked in there. And that's not easy to do. Because as I said, hey, I just came from winning a Super Bowl in San Francisco, and, of course, my role wasn't what Garoppolo's was, and it didn't change anything. And what happened is I fell right into that mode of what the Jets were before I got there. And what happened whenever I left after 10 weeks, went back to San Francisco, my performance raised back up to the level of what the 49ers were. So it's kind of weird how people can fall into a great situation and play up to that level or down to that level. So I give Garoppolo kudos for being able to come in and take everything he learned while he was at New England and being in a power position at quarterback to make that difference. And I'm telling you what, man, he's bringing back the feel of old, which is exactly the feeling that New England has right now. The 49ers have had it. They've had it for years, but they lost it for a while. But now, 49er faithful, is back, and we can thank Garoppolo, Shanahan, Lynch, Mayhew, all those important people, that made key decisions at the right time. 2018 is going to be a great year for the 49ers.
Well, you touched on an awful lot of things that I know that we wanted to review as we did a 2017 season in review. We're going to continue to do that and talk about what Jimmy Garoppolo means to the 49ers and the direction going forward. So as we continue, you talked about Jimmy Garoppolo and what a single player can do for a team's confidence. You talked about how, in your time with the Jets, and you can really take on the personality of the team or at least the mood around the locker room and the attitude within the confidence level of the results of things that are going on. Obviously, one person can't just step in and have everybody respond. There has to be some kind of groundwork laid for everyone to respond. Do you think the 49ers' response to Jimmy Garoppolo is a combination of Kyle Shanahan's leadership coupled with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it like a confidence in, hey, the front office went out and immediately tried to better the team, and we're responding to him because we're seeing his work ethic and his play? How important is it for the GM and the coach to lay out that leadership and then have a guy like Garoppolo come in to just kind of build off that? Like, at what point does it really start to move?
I totally agree with the point you just made, and I've got a great explanation. One, before Garoppolo came in, we talked about the 49ers making the right decision to bring the right people in. Coach Shanahan, Lynch, Martin Mayhew. We talked about that. We talked about them making, some good decisions. And remember, we had a team that I believe at least 5 out of 7 games or so, they were losing by 2 or 3 points. I mean, they were in ball games. So it wasn't like the 49ers were playing terrible. They were right along the path that we thought they should be in their process of changing the culture. And we felt like next year those games that we were losing by 2 and 3 will start winning. The difference is the Garoppolo decision expedited the same movement that they were already in process of. But when you take a player in a key position that has the ball in his hands every snap of the game, it can expedite the vision. It can expedite how quickly you get to where you want to get. And what he did is being able to play quarterback the way he does, which had sat and watched Tom Brady do it for years, that was taking players that many across the NFL, the majority of evaluators, analysts would say, New England has average players. They bring in new receivers every few years. They bring in different running backs every so often. But somehow, and even troubled players, but they bring those players in and those players conform to the New England way. Those offensive players, they conform to the Brady way. He seemed to always get them open. He seemed to throw them open. They seem to always be where they're supposed to be. Well, what Garoppolo has done is expedited that in the 49ers, because all of a sudden Garoppolo starts, and you start finding receivers, tight ends, running backs in position where they're supposed to be. Now, were they in that position before? They were practicing those same great plays that we talked about Shanahan having, and that, he was opening up his playbook. But Garoppolo came in a very short period of time, and with the playbook opened up to whatever extent that Shanahan thought he could handle. And he was throwing people open. Guys were catching balls, converting third downs, or going from 1st and 10 to first down again, or second. So there were times they weren't even in third down conversion situations, and they were getting first downs. All of that is because of Garoppolo's leadership, Garoppolo's preparation, Garoppolo's experience from where he came from. So, yes, it definitely was about Kyle Shanahan, who had already started the process. His process has worked before, and we see it and we saw it beginning to work. And we felt like it would take the rest of this year, to continue that process before we and more players to get this team where it needed to get. And again, as I stated, Garoppolo expedited that movement because of the player he is, what he learned in the place he was before in New England, and because of the respect he earned in a short period of time and the accountability. You see him on the sideline. You see what he's saying to players, in between, getting back on the field with the offense before 2-minute situations. He's talking to them. He's telling them where they should be. He's telling them what they should look at based on what the defense is playing. And he's earned their confidence because these players knew, if I'm where I'm supposed to be, Garoppolo's going to get me the ball. Man, I tell you what, after a short period of time, see, we saw it in games. I guarantee you they saw it in practice. So their confidence had already grown in Garoppolo before they even stepped on the game field when we saw it. So that's my overall look at why the 49ers are ending the season in a total different way than what it started and the way the middle of the season had gone.
Yeah, I think the you know, I think the players seeing what John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan had put out originally with their vision. I think they had buy-in from day one. I think all the players, everyone was going out trying real hard, believing in good things. And then, you know, they were in a lot of close games early in the season, you know, especially against teams like the Rams. I mean, they had a real chance to beat the Rams. They lost in a last-second play to the Arizona Cardinals. They lost in overtime to the Indianapolis Colts, a real close one to the Redskins. And, you know, just they you know, it's like they were in games. You can see they had some confidence, but after a while, you know, you lose close games. It definitely can wear on you when you can't get that first win in the books. And then even though they were able to finally get that first win after, I think it was the 10th game of the year against the Giants, obviously they believe in Kyle Shanahan, they believe in John Lynch, and they probably realize, you know, this is going to get better at some point. But then when, I don't know, is it like when they see the front office's willingness to go get a player like this, and then, you know, like you said, Jimmy Garoppolo comes in and just brings so much leadership, preparation, and then you start to see it on the field. It seems like it's just infectious. It just spreads to everybody, and it's been really great to see how everyone is bought in, and how everyone is responding to the coaching staff, and especially to the new quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right, and you know what I see in addition to that? I believe this team bought in before Garoppolo.
Right.
You know, but it takes certain things and certain people to move it forward quicker. And we saw it better in this example than we probably ever seen before, because this team really was performing substantially prior to Garoppolo arriving. So all the credit still goes to Shanahan and what they had in process. It really does. And, you know, these moments like getting Garoppolo, you know, nobody saw it coming. But, again, that's a great decision to contact the right people at the right moment in the season, because, see, New England could have waited to the offseason to trade Garoppolo. They could have done it, you know, prior to. They had a lot of AFC teams that wanted Garoppolo bad. But it's timing. It's making the right call at the right time. And that's just part of that new regime. They took advantage of those moments that you take care of in your personal life, in business, professionally, everything. You know, you gotta, you know, they say you got to get the, you got to get the cooking while the cooking is hot, or something of that nature. And that's what they did. It's all about calculated moves. And they were very calculated in when they approached New England. And New England was at a point of not weakness, but they were at a point where they had the right team that was out of their conference in the NFC instead of the AFC. So a lot of things fell in line, but it's all because of the new regime and the decisions that they made and when they made those decisions. So everything still has got to be credited to the new staff, new front office, new coach that came in, because this is part of their plan. So it's working perfectly. Nobody knew that Garoppolo was going to be not miracle worker, but you know, this is where within his reach, where within his talent ability, and where within his control to just will this team to do what they're doing. You know, and it reminds me a lot, just being honest, of I love Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, man, he can just will his players, you know, to perform, you know, at a high expectations. And, you know, the 49ers now have a quarterback that can remind them of some great ones, you know, not putting him into that category of our great quarterbacks. But, man, we've had some great ones that played at a high level, that raised the level of the play of everybody around them. And so it creates a great path of the direction of where the 49ers are going.
Yeah, you bring up Aaron Rodgers. When I watch Jimmy Garoppolo, the two players that come to mind for me are Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. He has the pocket presence of Aaron Rodgers and also Tom Brady because he's nimble like Rodgers, but he's got Brady's big game ability. You look at him out there, his cadence is the same too. He sounds just like Brady. You can tell he really learned from him, and I think it sure looks like everyone just they see him, they see his preparation, his leadership, and they just respond to it, just as if Tom Brady was signed. And I don't think that I think it's obviously very early to say that he is those guys, but right now he sure is playing like those guys, and he's got the poise of those guys.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is, and I don't think it's going to stop. I think next year begins right now. The preparation.
Right.
I guarantee you, these receivers who really started playing. I mean, man, what these guys were doing, they looked like stars. I mean, stars in the making. What he was doing, getting the ball to them, and the tight end getting the ball across the middle, and at one point 4 receptions for 100 yards, and numbers of guys are popping up on the screen that we knew they were on the team, but all of a sudden they're making plays and they're contributing to wins. I mean, to finish 5 games in a row, win in the NFL after you started out, so dismal. Oh my goodness, man! I don't think we can put enough accolades on him right now. That would be deserving. But what I do know is from now until training camp starts, there's going to be so much work done by these players to earn the respect of these coaches and decision makers who decide, this roster. They're going to be doing everything in their power. Every receiver, hey, when Garoppolo says I'm in town or fly here to me and let's throw the ball, they're going to be there. When these running backs get that call, I'm there, G. What time you want me there? All of that
right.
is going to determine the continual continuity of this offensive team. And we're talking about offense, but at the end of the day, a player like Garoppolo, a player like Brady, a player like Steve Young and Joe Montana, their performance and their leadership raises the level of the entire team. I mean, we got a great kicker, Gould. From him to our punter to, our defensive play, there are guys that really started to play better on defense. Now they're not what we thought they should be right now, but I do believe that this entire team, where it is deficient in, it will be the level of talent will be raised either in free agency or in the draft, and this team is going to be well equipped going into training camp to prepare the final roster for the 2018 season.
Now, you experienced something similar to this. It was obviously the expectations were different because in 1990 the 49ers were 14-2. They had gotten to the NFC Championship game. Joe Montana had broken his hand, among other injuries. It really kept him out of football for about 2 years. And the team was given over to Steve Young, and it wasn't an easy transition in 1991. Steve Young went through his own injuries, and Roger Craig was gone, and you were asked to, as the leading rusher in 1990, you were asked to take the reins along with guys like Keith Henderson and Tom Rathman to lead the ground attack. And it was definitely a transition. And Steve Young went through his injuries, and Steve Bono took over. The team was 4-6, but something happened at the end of that season, and you guys were able to rattle off 6 straight wins. Even though it wasn't a postseason berth, it carried you over into the next year. I know the circumstances were a little different, but what was the what was the energy like and the expectation like after the 91 season going into 92?
Right, and and Harris Sidney was one of those that could play that tailback position or that one back. He was a fullback, but he played that one back set a lot. And when you lose a player like Roger Craig and along that same time, you're losing Joe Montana. You had a qualified player in Steve Young that had to I think he had the respect of the team, but if you're not the starter, it's a different level of respect. He came in and earned the respect, and of course, when you win MVP in the league, your first year starting, taking over for Joe Montana, it kind of helps you move to the next level, and it makes the transition a little bit easier. But as far as losing players, we run a lot, also left. So you're talking about three key cogs of that Super Bowl run in that organization. And we had that one hiccup that year where, you're right, we came back and rolled off 6 straight games, and really the only reason we didn't make the playoffs is because of how well the NFC played as a conference played that year. But there's absolutely nobody that wanted to see us in the playoffs. And I think we were only a game out. And if we'd have got in, we'd have made it to the Super Bowl that year because, we had that transition. But we finally figured it out, and we were rolling, by the time the playoffs came. And every team was extremely excited that we did not make the playoffs. But but you know what? I played my role that year. When the 49ers drafted me, they had just won back-to-back Super Bowls, which was incredible. And to come in and pretty much be loaded at every position, and and I sold myself, during the postseason college football season. Heck, that season I had under 700 yards rushing. So people may think, man, how in the heck was he a first-round draft pick and he only had 600 and some yards rushing? Well, I had 5.5 yards a carry in Florida State. We were a passing offense. But what I did is I wasn't a first-round draft pick when the season ended. I became a first-round draft pick between the season ending and draft day because I went to the combine, ran a 4.3 40, 38 vertical jump. Then I went to the Senior Bowl and won the most valuable player on the South team. Played for Buddy Ryan, who put me in a position, and I thank him still today because he's a tough guy. Practices are tough, and there were the 2 coaches in that Senior Bowl game, North and South game, was Buddy Ryan, who was my coach, and Marty Schottenheimer, who was the North team coach. I was very fortunate because I could have been on Schottenheimer, or he could have been our coach, and they didn't hit in practice very much. It was one of kind of a 49er practice where you don't hit very much. It's Senior Bowl, don't want to get anybody hurt. But things worked out great for me because I played for a coach that banged every day in practice. I was 170 pounds, and I started at running back in that game. And I could have shied away from it, but that earned me and helped me also become a first rounder because you got all these NFL coaches standing on the sidelines, end zone to end zone, and they're evaluating everything from you to how you look shirtless to, what you do when you're walking, sleeping, eating, getting off the bus, what you do every moment on that field. And what Buddy Ryan did that helped me out, we hit. He had me blocking linebackers that were, 240-plus pounds. He had me blocking, protecting the quarterback. He had me running in between the tackles. He had me running outside the tackles. And I made those plays. And that's what the NFL needed to see me do is, could I be durable? Should I be tough? See, Bobby Bowden knew all of that at Florida State. Those who knew me knew that. We were passing offense, but I could run between the tackles and all. And that game sold me on the 49ers. Those individual team workouts when Mike Holmgren came to Doak Campbell Stadium and worked me out individually, sold me, to the 49ers. So all of those postseason things is what took me from potentially, a later pick up into the first round. So, it's hard work. It's taking advantage of opportunities, and that prepared me for that year that we're speaking of. When Joe, had gone, Roger had gone, Ronnie had gone, Steve had came into the fold and was running things, and I was able to move up through training camp and move up through proving myself in practice that I could be the guy. Now, yes, I wasn't getting 20 carries a game, and we were sharing, I was starting, but Keith Henderson had a vital role, Tom Rathman had a vital role, and Harris Sidney had one. But overall, we ended up playing very, very well at the end of that season, and that was the only year that we did not make the playoffs that I was there. The first 4 out of 5 years, we were in the NFC Championship game, and 1991 was the year we didn't make it. So it was still a great time, and that season just propelled us into the next season where we rolled again, and we were back in the NFC Championship game.
We talked about Jimmy Garoppolo and what he means to catapulting the team going forward. What was I know we've talked in the past over the last couple of years occasionally about this, but what was the mindset? How were your teammates responding to Steve Young after Joe Montana left? Was it pretty similar, or was it just getting used to a new guy, or did it just were there vast differences?
Well, you know what, Steve had already been there for about 6 years, I believe.
Right.
He was already there. So players knew the reputation of Steve Young. They knew his skill set and how different it was than Joe's. He could run more, but the man could also throw. But when it comes to players know how to compartmentalize things in life. And they knew how to realize, hey, you know what, Steve is our quarterback now. We love Joe. He's a big part of what this organization has accomplished, but life goes on. It's like when he went to Kansas City. We still love Joe, but we got to move forward with our guy. And that's what Steve did, and that's what the team did. We moved forward with Steve and picked up right where it was about the organization at that point. And speaking of that, see that this has nothing to do with our show, but it's something that really bothered me this past weekend about NFL players.
Yeah.
Harrison from the Pittsburgh Steelers, he signed with Pittsburgh a year ago, I believe, and he signed for a particular role. Okay,
right.
And it reminds me of when Rich Kotite, I went to New York. Rich Kotite told me he was going to use me a certain way. He didn't. I let it bother me. Tomlin signed Harrison, told him of his role. Well, that role didn't come to fruition. So as a player, you do get frustrated. Any player would. So you know what? He became frustrated. He wasn't playing. The role that they stated he would play, he didn't play. So I don't know what he did in the interim on that team. I know he went to Pittsburgh and said, hey, let me, if you're not going to play me, release me. Let me go somewhere else and play. Now, no player wants to be in that situation. But nonetheless, whatever he did, they released him. He goes and he signs with New England. Now, he can't tell Belichick to sign him. Belichick signed him because he sees a role that he can play. And as you see this last game, I believe he had 2 sacks in it.
He had 2 sacks yesterday.
Yeah,
amazing.
He had two sacks. Well, when the microphone got in the face of the Pittsburgh Steelers in the locker room, they talked terrible about this player. And when they know that if a team wants to cut you, they're going to cut you. So it could happen to them at some point in their career. So why would you talk negative about this player? Well, the one thing I love about the 49ers that I learned as a young player is that nobody criticized the 49ers. I mean, you just got rid of 3 great 49er players. But, you know, they didn't talk bad about the player. And that player didn't talk bad as he walked out the door. Joe didn't. Roger didn't. Ronnie Lott didn't. But everybody knew what the game, what the business side of the game, and they moved on. You know, and that's the way it was for that season. You know, where everybody realized, compartmentalized things, and moved forward, did what we were supposed to do, did what we had to do. And Joe did what he had to do. He left, went to Kansas City, and, you know, and played extremely well for another few years. And that's what these players with the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't doing. They're being very harsh, and one day as they get older and their role diminishes, you know, they're going to see what Harrison saw. But thank goodness for the 49ers, we didn't have to go through that, and our team, you know, stayed on path, on course to what our goal was, and that was to get back to the playoffs.
Well, yeah, you bring up a really interesting point with James Harrison. I mean, you went through something similar yourself personally. I know that, you know, you've heard lots of things released from NFL Films over the years on various videos, and it's obvious that Joe wasn't happy to leave, but he was professional about it. I don't believe he was bad-mouthing anybody, and, yeah, there was a definite competitive rivalry going on with Steve and Joe and that meeting in '94 and everything like that, and, you know, Joe really wanted to win that game, but that was just competition. That's just what, you know, that's what competition brings out, but it wasn't a lot of bad mouth. I didn't hear anything like that. I never saw anything like that in the papers or anything like that. And I think, like, in your situation, you know, leaving as a free agent after the '94 season, going to New York, and because that was not part of the 49er way, the 49er culture, it left the door open for you to come back. And now you were, I believe you're, one of 7 players to play a 17-game season because the way the bye weeks fell when you were released and rejoined the 49ers. And obviously that culture of professionalism and a sense of family had to be what brought you back. Because I don't think you would have, yeah, they could pick you up, but you don't have to play unless you want to.
Absolutely, and, you know, I think it worked both ways. You know, I hope that I was a great employee and a player that played, you know, 5 years, and at my talent level, my size, et cetera, you know, I thought I had played well, you know, well enough to leave as a free agent after the Super Bowl year. And you're right, being able to come back had to do with a professionalism in the way that I left, a professionalism, you know, in the way they took my signing with another team. And then, you know, after, the time in New York and it didn't go well, and being released after 10 weeks, which was the bye week for the Jets, you know, to immediately be signed back and have interest from the 49ers to bring me back. And they had already played their bye week. So that allowed me to be the first player, that played in an entire season without a bye week. Or what was it, 17 games?
17 games.
You know,
you were the first
one. Yeah, the first one to do it, and, you know, which is remarkable, I guess, when you think about it. But I think what's more remarkable is to be able to get back with the 49ers and on a Wednesday and play in their game on a Sunday. So that means a lot to me that they thought enough to, you know, bring me back and show that, you know what, it's not, things happen, business happens, but, you know, if you're good enough to play, you know, they'll bring you back and, you know, bring you to their team. And that's what is different with Pittsburgh and Harrison. You know, players are running off at the mouth, saying things that they shouldn't, not really seeing them in that position when really it could be all of them at some point in their career. And they talked about, you know, taking them out of the ring, you know, like all the accomplishments that he made are eliminated because he left and went to their biggest rival.
Wow.
Well, you can't take away what he's earned. You can't take away all the accomplishments that he's had. You know, yes, one day he's worthy of being in that Ring of Honor. And upon his retirement, he should be put up there just based on his performance. And that never happened with Joe. It never happened with Roger. It never happened with Ronnie, or any of the other great players that were released or, went out the way that they didn't want to go out. That's why all those guys came back and retired as 49ers whenever they decided to retire. That's why you find guys going back to alumni weekend and enjoying the camaraderie of their former teammates. It's because business is business, but there are certain things you don't say and things you don't do in the process, because there's a lot more life after this brief moment in history. Everybody has a choice. Teams have a choice to release you, cut you, trade you, and you have a choice to leave without being, criticized, publicly or privately.
For sure. And what's really strange about the James Harrison situation is, it's not like he just refused to play until they traded him to New England or something like that. They released him. He was sitting out there for a while, and then all of a sudden, and this is what great organizations do. We saw this when Eddie DeBartolo was running things. He'd pick up guys near the end of the year. I remember 1998, right before the wild card game against Green Bay, they brought Charles Haley out of retirement and basically almost like, I don't know if they paid him per sack like they did Tim Harris in '94, but he played a very key role in that game, made a really big play that turned the game in favor of the Niners, and he hadn't played in a couple of years. And then even in '95 with yourself, you came in, and then it was a very similar run to what we saw this year. The Niners were 5-4 going into Dallas, and I believe that you guys won 6 out of 7. And when you came back, I remember your key punt return to against a very explosive Minnesota team to get the score up 14-0. And so those late season acquisitions can really be important. And that's what I see New England doing with James Harrison. That's what I see when you were playing, and I see that now with the current front office. Bringing a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo in tells you that the management is able to do and willing to bring guys in late in the year to bring confidence and to add to a late season surge to bring to kind of catapult you into next year.
Right. Moves like that is very, very similar to a chess game, because you don't know what decision you're going to make based on what somebody else's move is until they make it. And you got to be, smart. You got to be very direct in these decisions, and you can't sit and wait. And and that's where the 49ers are now. And the decision that they're making, they're calculated, they're well thought out, and you got to make them, based on what's best for your team and organization. But these are great points that you just brought up, man. You see, this is why I love doing this show, is because, one, I'm doing it with one of the greatest or the biggest 49er fans that's well versed in the history, that can even bring back my recollection on a lot of things that may slip my mind or that I forget. So all the listeners out there, thank you for listening, but you got a historian here that can bring back some memories that I'm sure all of you can remember too.
Oh, thanks, man. It's definitely that was really that's how I got through a lot of my life. I was really immersed in my team, and I tried to learn everything I could. I mean, I was living in Wisconsin. I wasn't even in California, but I had to figure out every way I could to learn about you guys. I had all the stats memorized. And it was kind of crazy, but well, the 49ers definitely have a lot ahead of them. And like you said before, the 2018 season really begins right now. They obviously are fielding calls. They're not saying who's calling, which is probably wise, but receivers are calling about playing with Jimmy Garoppolo next year. They've got $117 million under the cap. They have until March 6th to sign. That's the date that they put out there. That's how they want to get a deal with Jimmy Garoppolo done before March 6th. Otherwise, they're going to franchise him. So either way, one way or another, he will be the quarterback next year. And we've talked over the last few shows about players that they could bring in. We know wide receiver is is one of the position. Based on what you saw yesterday, Carlos Hyde running for about, I believe, 90 yards and averaging 6 a carry, and I believe he scored 2 touchdowns as well. How do you feel the team is going to move on from Hyde, or do you think he's a part of their plans?
Well, I think it's something that has to be evaluated because Hyde could have heard some of the things that we were talking about because we were very specific and detailed and about what the expectations should be of Hyde moving forward. And you know what? He showed the ability to run hard. I mean, we talked about getting the unseen yardage, getting more out of the play than that was there. He is definitely a player that can play in this league. If there's an opportunity to get another player, I think you still bring in a player in the draft. I know you keep Breida. Hyde, again, showed me that he wants to be here. So I'll leave that decision up, to the decision makers with the 49ers. But what I will say is this. Hyde bought in because, we were looking at a first half of the season, which we all expected to be a lengthy rebuild year. But because of everything that transpired, the Coach Shanahan, the front office, the decisions that they made, especially the one with Garoppolo, they were able to make a strong finish that energized the franchise. And what it did is it expedited the rebuild, which was great for all the fans, and it gave us great material to talk about because we didn't expect that. And part of that expedited rebuild is the performance of players. And one of those is Hyde. Hyde really, from a competitive perspective, you got to have 2 running backs that can actually start. And he started watching Breida and Breida's performance and the accountability and expectations of Hyde raised. So he put himself in a position. I don't know if he can get a payday like he may be expecting, but he can definitely be much more serviceable. And that's not a negative thing saying serviceable, but you always got to have 2 top backs. And I think he actually proved to me that he's potentially capable of doing that. I don't know if I'd take my entire running game and throw it on Hyde because I don't know if he has the respect of defenses across the NFL yet. But I do believe he's a player that I wouldn't give up on. But if we didn't sign him and he went someplace else, I wouldn't be fearful of what he would do to us when we played them. So I don't know if that makes sense or not. And there's no downplay on him. It's just being real about it. He, hadn't shown just that total excitement of, we got to have him, or that player that, we let him go, he's going to kill us if he plays against us. So, again, I'm going to leave that decision up to the decision makers, but I do know that with him or without him, I think Breida stays, and I think we definitely need some competition going into training camp somewhere in the draft or free agency going into next season.
Right. You're probably right about that I think it's better than 50-50 that he comes back. Obviously, the decision makers are going to make the decisions, but I think it's I think what he showed over the last few weeks tells me that it's at least a good possibility that he could return. I know he said he wants to play there. He wants to be a part of what's going on. So it's you look. He has the ability to pass or to catch out of the backfield. He has the potential to average 5 yards a carry or more. In these games, he's played pretty well down the stretch. I don't know that he's a franchise back, but he could be a guy. He could be the guy that is the leader of the running back corps going forward. But I do think they're going to probably draft a guy. I think Joe Williams will be coming back off an injury this year, so he'll be there. So it'll be interesting to see how what they do going forward. I think the possibility of getting Le'Veon Bell is probably not realistic. That would really be something, but Pittsburgh probably doesn't want to lose him. So
you know
we'll
what?
see what happens going forward, but I think it's at least a possibility.
Yes, and I think the 49ers need to do whatever they have to do to bring in competition at that position. Whatever it is to raise the level of play of every one of these guys, that's what you do. If it's, keeping Hyde and bringing in, as I said earlier, draft picks and or free agency, that's what you do. You've got to do that. And whoever wins, that's who stays with this team next year. If it's bring in Le'Veon Bell, then you know what? That answers a lot of questions for you. And see, the way I look at this evaluation process and the decisions that the front office makes moving forward, I look at it as, how are you looking at your team? Is it AG or BG? Is it before Garoppolo or after Garoppolo? Because if you look at it before Garoppolo, there are a lot of these players that wouldn't change your mind regardless of how they played after Garoppolo. Now when Garoppolo comes after AG, then all of a sudden you start reevaluating the talent level that you had on this team. These guys started to play, but regardless, you've got to bring in a competitive level that raises the level of play of everybody. And whoever ends up on this team at the end, they would have earned it. They would have earned it through off-season, OTAs, preseason, training camp, all of that. So there's plenty enough time to get the talent in to make it increasingly competitive. That's what you got to do. If you can make it competitive, then you know what? The right guy at the end of the day is going to make the top 2 or 3 guys on the depth chart. That's when you make a great team.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about it. I think Hyde is definitely a possibility to be one of those guys, and that they're going to make. I just have a lot of confidence in this front offense to make the right decision and to they target specific guys. John Lynch came out this week and kind of talked about what they were targeting last year. They wanted a guy to make an impact at slot receiver, and they got that in Trent Taylor in the 5th round. They wanted a fullback who can not only block, but be heavily involved in the passing game, and they got that in Kyle Juszczyk. They wanted a guy that could take the top off of defense, and they got that in Marquise Goodwin. So that they went out and they are pinpointing the needs of the team, and they're targeting specific players that can fit those roles. And so far, I've really liked the guys that they've brought in, and the guys that they've let go. You can tell, even Navarro Bowman, the Raiders may not retain him because they're seeing exactly what the 49ers saw, that he's unfortunately slowing down. That Achilles injury definitely slowed him down, and he can't make the impact that he once did. And so the Niners had to move forward. And so you can see that they're making the right decisions. And then obviously Jimmy Garoppolo, no one's going to question that decision. So I really trust the front office in the decisions that they're making going forward.
Absolutely, and we can throw out numerous names out there, but what I do know is there's guys that are on the wish list. What's interesting is Garoppolo made that offensive line look very serviceable. I mean, nobody's talked about. I would like to see the stats that the organization has on the performance of the offensive line and see how did it change before Garoppolo and after Garoppolo. You know how they rate offensive linemen on their blocks and stuff?
Right.
Because obviously that has improved. We've talked before on how Garoppolo moves about that pocket, kind of positions him in a place. He feels the pressure, and it kind of actually, sets the lineman up, to make blocks even easier. But it will be interesting to see those stats. But we do know, even though we have, I think, the making of a great defensive front. If you look at some of the biggest needs in the draft or to get in free agency, I would say, receiver, even though these young receivers actually stepped up to the plate. Then when we get the guys off injured reserve. But there's guys out there you can't overlook, guys like Sammy Watkins and Jarvis Landry, who I know the Dolphins want to sign, but I don't think they've signed him yet. But those guys
right.
at receiver, and you talking about, again, I like that defensive front, but you know what? You got the Giants, Justin Pugh, that is available. You've got offensive linemen like, New York Giants, Weston Richburg, Andrew Norwell. So there's guys out there once the evaluation is done, and I'm sure Lynch and them are full speed ahead in that evaluation at every position of need, which actually is all of them, just being honest. I don't think there's nothing out of, except quarterback, that's out of the question. Cornerback, improving every area of the defense, even though we're high on that defensive line. But I'm going to leave this in the hands of the experts, and we're going to continue to talk about it as we go through the off season and kind of see where we're at and where we're moving to. But that's going to be a great process for us because we knew we were going to be a competitor next year. But these last 6 games really got the 49er faithful and us excited about every decision that's made this offseason is going to be interesting. And we got a lot of trust in these decision makers, moving forward.
I think that is definitely how that is the outlook on the team this year. So, we went through a lot of stuff. We covered quite a lot over the course of the 2017 season. It was definitely a very up and down roller coaster of a ride, but what a way to finish. A lot of confidence going into next year, and we'll be monitoring it very closely to see what they end up doing for the off season. The next 2 months, they're both probably going to see a couple of moves, just like we did last year before free agency ever happened. That's when they picked up Kwan Williams, who ended up being their starting nickel corner, which was a really good move getting him off of New England. So, there's lots of things that can happen. I think they even got Earl Mitchell before free agency started off Miami, and he's been the starting defensive tackle against the run all year. So I expect to see a number of things happen even before free agency. We'll have probably a very busy free agency and then the draft. So there's going to be a lot happening, and we'll be here doing shows and talking about it the whole way.
Absolutely. And lastly, one more move. We've talked about one position of all positions on this team that needs to be upgraded. In my opinion, probably even more than offensive line, but you got to have that line. But we see that Garoppolo can do his thing with this offensive line, and we're going to get better. But the one position is corner. We've been trying to fill that, trying to get that fixed for literally a number of years. And 2 guys that I think probably at least 2 of the top guys that we may have a chance at, Malcolm Butler, at New England, because, Garoppolo, all he got to do is pick up the phone and say, hey, man, the Bay Area is what's happening. You need to come out here with your boy.
Right.
Malcolm Butler and the other one is the Rams' Tremaine Johnson. Now, would he want to leave the direction in which the Rams are going? Hey, I like what the Rams are doing, but again, that's an option. Those are 2 key guys that play a key position that can help Shanahan 28-plus points a game that he's accustomed to. Those 2 corners can keep the opposing team under that number. That's why they need those guys out on the island by themselves that can handle being out there on an island by themselves. So we'll see which direction they go, but they're going to have to get some shutdown corners.
Yep, no doubt about it. And you brought up the 2 names that I'm most interested in as well. I think either one of those guys could really help the Niners. And, getting anybody off the Rams or the Seahawks or the Cardinals is a good thing because it just increases your odds of winning the division. And once you win the division, you're in the playoffs with a home game, and anything can happen. So, yeah, I would agree. We'll be talking more about corner and these other positions in the coming weeks. So, got any final thoughts as we sign off for the day?
Well, whenever the season started in 2017, ensued. Nobody expected 2018 to begin the way it did. But I am extremely excited in not only how things have transitioned, I'm excited about how we have done as a show going into year 4, and how we've had, just the support and the following that we've had. And we hope that we can continue getting stronger, being a better show, and being more accurate, as I believe we have been, on our analysis of where the 49ers and this league is going. So I'm excited, to go into year 4 with you, Matt, and just make 2018 wonderful and awesome for our families, for the Grueling Truth shows, and 2018 we already can see that the 49ers are going to have a great 2018. They're at least on the way to it. So thank you. It's been wonderful, and look forward to 2018.
Well, I definitely want to agree with everything you said. I feel the feeling is very mutual. I'm very excited about, this is concluding year 3, heading into year 4, which is that's amazing to me that we've been able to make this happen, and it's been a lot of fun. And I also hope that we can continue to get better, continue to have more fun. And now we started at a couple of really lean years there, 15 and 16, and then the start of 17, and now hopefully we, as we move into year 4, it will be even more fun from a winning standpoint to talk about winning football, and as it sure has been fun these last few weeks. So I too very much appreciate the time that we've been able to have, and moving into year 4, it's going to be better than even in the years past. And so I want to wish everybody a happy New Year, blessings on all your families, and thanks for listening. And we'll definitely be reaching out soon, and we'll let you know when there's another show coming out. So for Dexter Carter, I'm Matt Andruscavage. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth Radio Network, where the legends speak.